You're tuning into Accelerate Generational Wealth, a monthly learning series produced by SVN Excel Commercial Real Estate. Hosted by Jenna and Brian Truman, this series brings together guest speakers who are experts in their field to provide cutting-edge industry information. Whether you're new to the business or a seasoned investor looking to diversify your portfolio, you'll find a wealth of knowledge at absolutely no cost to you. Without further ado, SVN Excel proudly presents Accelerate Generational Wealth.
Yeah, I've just tried to earn his trust. You know, we went and had lunch the other day, but yeah, I'm just trying to work my way in. Now, so talk about your experience when you talked about coming out and doing, working for those large firms. Mm-hmm. You said, okay, property management, right? Yep. And then you talked about asset management and then acquisitions. All three of those probably gave you. You probably didn't realize when you started working in those how much that was going to help you when you started your own shop.
Yes, I very much got lucky and kind of stumbled into those opportunities, and they absolutely were the biggest springboard for my career that I could have, possibly had at, 19. Getting in, because a lot of people, they want to figure out how do you get into real estate? How do you, learn this business? Go get in the weeds in property management. You're going to learn a lot quick. And then work into asset management. Figure out, okay, this is how you actually determine if a property's performing or not. And then, pound the phones and start making some cold calls, on the acquisitions front. See how that goes. I really did get to experience a lot of different things at a relatively, when I was first starting out. And it helped me because I see this too. I see people often want to jump right into investments and they want to jump right into acquisitions, but they skip the whole, they jump right into the spreadsheet, right? And I had an intern for me this summer, and the biggest thing I tried to convey to him was you have to be able to take this spreadsheet and apply it in real life and actually make it realistic. That is something that I see a big gap with people first trying to get into the business. They take, anyone can make a deal look good in Excel, I promise you. It's very easy to make deals look good. It's really, really hard to be disciplined and evaluate deals accurately, especially if, I'm in the business where I make money when I do deals. So that technically incentivizes me to want to make deals work. So you have to have the discipline to not just do some Excel gymnastics and drop the cap and increase your rent growth and make sure that the deal works. So those experiences in college were obviously they were huge for me, and that's usually the advice I give to people, especially if they're still in high school or college, if they want to get into this thing. It's go work for someone doing it at a high level. I think the same thing can apply for people of to anyone regardless of age. If you really want to drop that learning curve, going and working for an experienced operator, you're probably going to get a lot more value out of that than you are I know you'll get a lot more value out of that than you will any book or podcast or those types of things.
So how did you find your intern that worked for you this summer? He was a nice kid.
Yeah, he was a nice
young
kid.
Man.
So I'm gonna tie. So I was talking with Mike and Drew about Twitter earlier. So I'll hit on social media real quick. I do not like social media. I really don't particularly care for it. I am on all of them, but I don't post very often. I made a LinkedIn post at the start of this year that went viral, actually, on accident. Basically what I did was I just did a little year in review because I wanted to show brokers and investors, those people I had, interact with, that I'm actually doing stuff. So send me your deals, right? So I made this post on LinkedIn, and it ended up getting 500,000 impressions. My LinkedIn is now the worst place on the planet. All the people that that I end up getting connections with, and my inbox, it's just become a cesspool. But I did get connected with some interesting people from that as well. one of which ended up being my summer intern. There's been now my current insurance relationship was met through that LinkedIn. Like, there's been a lot of good stuff that's come from it. But so that was how I found him. But then tying it back to like general social media, Twitter is probably the most valuable tool that I use today in terms of just like staying up to date with things in real estate and actually learning from people doing this at a high level. I get probably 10 times more value out of Twitter than I do any podcast, any book, anything like that. There's a little subset of Twitter that they call RE-Twit that is just full of really sharp people that are actually doing stuff. They just pop on Twitter once or twice a day and fire some things off, and you get some really interesting conversations on there. So I just lurk in the background and just read what they post, but there's lots of good resources out there to really learn real estate at a high level, even as free as Twitter.
Yeah, he told me about that, and I was like, really? I was like, I'm on everything but Twitter.
Yeah,
like,
most
what?
people are. Most
What?
people are, but it's by far the most valuable for me. At
So
least.
now I got to get a Twitter account.
I back that too.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
You mentioned, I think, a very critical thing is like there's so few brokers here.
Mm-hmm.
What did Jake and your other favorable clients do that stand out compared to people that you're not likely to send that deal or take that offer more seriously with?
Oh, you're talking about me? Talking to me here? Yeah.
It's
Hey,
your show.
Yeah. So, well, I think for us is, and Mike got here early, so he called me. He says, "Hey, can I come in? I got here much earlier than I thought." So he's like, "Can I come in and hang out?" And so he came back in my office and hung out. And so he saw the big whiteboard back there, trying to find his name on there. But anyway, it's got a lot of people's names on it, from that standpoint. But the point I'm trying to make is, we get, like this week so far, I don't even know how many calls I've received, from investors who are like, "Hey, Brian, somebody told me I needed to call you. Maybe you could help me," right? And I'm like, okay, and then they just start running down. Well, this is what I'm looking for. This many doors, this many, units, value add, blah blah blah, and can you put me on your mailing list? And then it's like, okay, and it's tough to try to even ask them a question. It's just like they just ramble through, and just run it off, and then it's like, okay, thanks, right? And so I tell people all the time, I'm like, okay, if you want, if you want me to take you serious, I said, basically, you need to kind of send me a real estate, resume of who you are, what you've done, all that good stuff. But, more important than that, tell me about, not only your criteria, instead of just, I'm looking for value add and this many units, and I've got this kind of a budget, right? I'm like, okay, well, send me, something that gives me some detail, right? And so one of the things, Jake did was he sent me this map, right? It had a map. It had the highlighted areas of where, hey, I'm interested in here. But, and then he gave me all his very detailed, criteria, right? And the point here that I'm bringing up is that, okay, something like that versus somebody that just calls me and says in 30 seconds what they want, who do you think I'm going to have kind of top of mind if I come and buy a property, right? And, I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Probably we'll have to ask Rachel when she's, she has to put up with me on a day-in-day basis. But I have a lot of knowledge right here. I don't do the best job of, putting it in this CRM, right? From that standpoint. So I know a lot of people's, criteria. So when we're talking to a seller, we get a property, I could usually immediately go and say, okay, this is a Jake type of property, or this is a, Drew type of a property, or Mike, or Or if it's got 3 fur coats on it, then it's a Brandon deal, right? Something like that. But from that standpoint, so really, the short answer to all that babbling I've been doing is that Jake took the effort, put something down, put it on, send it to me, and so now I'm like, okay, I pretty much feel like, I pretty much know exactly what, he's looking for, right? So when I come by that stuff, then I can send it to, him going, okay, and sometimes it may, if it's the first couple of times I'm working with somebody, I may send them a couple of properties and to say, okay, I think this is kind of what I gathered you're looking for, right? But I ask them to give me feedback, right? I'm like, hey, please, you can tell me, that's the worst thing you ever sent me. What were you doing, right? I don't get offended over that kind of stuff, right? So, but what I'm trying to do is really pinpoint and narrow in on exactly what the client wants and what they're looking for, and so that's what most of all of our top clients have done a great job at. So we pretty much know exactly what they're looking for, from that standpoint. So did that answer the question for you?
I think so. Your whiteboard is not a CRM, by the way.
What's that?
A whiteboard is not a CRM.
Yeah. True. But I got to keep track of them somehow, so I can at least see their names up there. Yeah, it's kind of like 100 people on or something. I don't know what it is. So it's long, big. So, other questions? And Antonio loves cold calling.
I know he does. That's what I hear.
Yeah. He enjoys it. Yeah. And I'll tell you a hilarious cold calling story from a couple weeks ago. So Kanal was in here, I was in here, and Antonio were in here. We were all separate rooms making cold calls. And it was funny because all 3 of us came out of the different rooms, and we all looked at each other and were just shaking our head like, wow. And all 3 of us had just barely had some seller just giving us the riot act about calling them and whatever. And so, and I always tell our agents, I was like, you got to do the cold calling. I was like, you know what? And you can have people yell and scream at you, but guess what? I didn't die. I'm still alive, right? And I tell people, hey, the more no's you get, the closer you are to a yes, right? And so, and so you just, you keep calling. But it was just hilarious because all 3 of us, same day, same time, walked out and we just had somebody just give us the riot act. So, but like I say, we didn't die. We're still here to tell the story and look through it. So, anyway, questions? Other questions you got? Oh, sorry.
I was just curious about, we talked about your focus moving forward on the investor side and where you're going to try and raise capital in that way. What's your focus on the asset side? Are you focusing on this geography, certain asset types? Just curious what your outlook is.
Yeah. Again, something else I'm always trying to figure out, right? Like it's always a moving target, I would say. Like every time I've tried to make a plan in this business, that's usually not how it goes. In terms of what, Central Illinois that's kind of like my bread and butter at the moment. Like it's very, have those relationships, a track record up there. So, I'll always be looking for deals there. And then really trying to get something going in Tennessee as well. And kind of the strategy I try to take is to get as specific as I can on certain properties that I want to buy. And then having, getting calls on those properties. In terms of asset class, multifamily is kind of what I know. The short-term rental stuff, it was an opportunistic type play. Whenever those prices come back to earth, I'll buy some more, but until then, I'll just wait. So it's just, I think you have to have a core strategy, which for me is value-add multifamily. But there are times, if you pick the wrong strategy, then, you're not going to do any deals. So there are times when value-add multifamily isn't in the areas I look where it doesn't really work sometimes. So in those instances, like I'm just kind of always looking at the market and just staying up to date with different asset classes. And at some point, I'm sure I'll buy a storage facility or an office building. Like I plan on doing this thing for a while, so I'm sure I'll do it eventually. But just kind of always just keeping an eye on the market in general. I wish I knew where rates were going to go and where people were going to move to and all that good stuff. But it's challenging to get it. I'm not smart enough to consistently identify those opportunities.
So if there's anybody here that's looking to try to get their first property, what kind of advice would you give them?
That's a good question.
Would you say, hey, go as big as you can, start out small?
No, I wouldn't say
You don't need
that.
to-
I wouldn't say go as big as you can.
Call Brian as big as you can.
Yeah. No, I mean.
Well, I figured that was the response I was going to get, so I figured it's a good one to start.
There's nothing wrong with just starting with a single family house. I think it's very person dependent too. Like, some of my former coworkers at those large companies, for them, I would tell them like it technically is their first property that they'll be buying. But I tell them like, yeah, buy as big of a place as you can. Like I know you know what you're doing. There is a knowledge gap that is present in this business, and sometimes doing a large deal can really amplify that knowledge gap, especially if it's your first one. So, and again, relative is large, or large is relative in this instance. Like for me, like anything, I would consider large properties to be over 100 units. So I don't think that, and especially if you're bringing in outside money too, like that's a whole nother can of worms. You really need to feel competent in your own abilities, I think, before you do that and before you maybe bite off more than you can chew, because real estate values can go down, actually, and there are sometimes I think people forget that. So yeah, I think it's, there's nothing wrong with starting small and